I could save time in a battle. First thing that I'd like to do is to say every day till eternity passes away, just to spend them with you.
Are you guys seriously this calm?
Relax, Stuart. It's classic switcheroo. I give him money, he gives us Teddy.
You ever do anything that doesn't end up in a standoff, Chow?
I'm an international criminal. It always ends like this.
Because I'm going to tell you something. If this city isn't protected, this city will crumble. Yes. And if no one stands up, then the city will definitely crumble sooner. So it's my job to stand up. And not only to stand up, but to fight. And to fight for the little people who can't fight for themselves. And to fight for people who nobody else will fight for. And to go after people who, you know what? I'm tired.
Hey, folks. Thank you for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. Today is my 200th show. So, several things that I've done. I started out with a little bit of motor revving, as you all heard. And then I went to Axion Ghost. Axe marks the spot. Mr. Chow's elevator scene. And Jim Norton, his little thing about if I'm going to stand to the city, it was a comedy bit. So that's what you got today as the intro. Just letting you all know, I am super thrilled right now to introduce you to Craig again from Radiant Creators. And with that being said, this show, welcome to Kaiser's Castle. Take a seat on my big orange couch. Take a coffee, tea, soda, or an adult libation. Chill out on it. I'm going to bring you into the war room. And us two golf warriors are going to give you a little chat on two separate things that we both enjoy. And those two separate things are talking about amateur radio, which is ham radio, also known as ham radio. And we're going to talk about what used to be called Survivalist, but, you know, they toileted that name. That'll be in the second half. With that being said, thank you very much. Are you there, Craig?
Oh, I am definitely here. I am here. So, looks like all systems are go. Everything is working. So good. We got a good connection. So, do you really have a big orange couch?
Actually, I do. but it comes from the big orange couch is a new addition. It's theater of the mind. There was a place called the. We actually do now, but it was called the Elephant Bar in Columbus, Ohio, and their commercial was "Take a seat on the big orange couch," you know. So it's just something I stole from them, being very frank and honest.
Well, 200 shows. I mean, I'm jazzed to be on your 200th show. That's amazing. You've been putting out a lot of content, and it seems like we're huffing and puffing, and we're working on it and putting out content. And sometimes you take a little break, and you look and you see how far you've come. It's like if you're hiking up a switchback, up a mountain, you're going and going and going. Sometimes it's good to stop and look, and you realize, look how far I've come. So this is really one of those moments, you know, where you go, wow, I created, 200 shows. I mean, that's a lot of work. And how has it grown? I mean, because there was the first show, then there was the 20th, the 50th, the 100th. Now that you're at 200, like, how has the show evolved?
Well, I would think the show's evolved because I've been blessed that I'm happy with a small channel. I have 213 people on it. Most of them probably know me. I started it actually just for until my book comes out. It's kind of a time capsule for my wife and my son for when I die. They can still hear my voice. Sounds stupid and gay, but it is what it is. And I brought on mostly brothers who know me, and I've brought on some other guests. I had on, I can't even believe this, and he's not a bad guy. I actually liked him. Remember Adam and the Man back in the day? It was Adam Kokesh. I brought him on.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
I did him. I had John Carmen, great guy. Everybody I've had on has been really good. I try to treat them, I guess just to synopsize, I tried to follow The Art of Talk from Art Bell from listening. I read the book like a moron while I was going through college, but I used to listen to him when I was a Fed late at night, and he kept me company many a long night, and that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, I just decided this will be, until YouTube pulls it. And they'll probably pull it today because I plan on breaking all the TOSs. But I have a copy, and it'll go to BitChute. Same name, just on BitChute, folks. And you can find Radiant Creators on YouTube. You can find them on BitChute. You can find them on, and everybody who's ever listened to me knows you can find me in chat every time the Boiler Room's on. And that's with Alternate Current Radio. You got to listen to Hesher, Spore, Randy J, Infidel Pharaoh, and Jay Dyer on there. Now, I'll be in the chat. The chat's fun. That's why I always try to get to the chat when these shows uploaded. Now that I can't live stream for whatever reason. But the point is, just like with you, you're a Gulf War vet. I'm a Gulf War vet, and we have a lot more in common. I mean, we've had discussions, but let's save that for the second half. Let's dive right into amateur radio, and I'll start out with the actual radio system I've got uploaded, and that'll be how we start. And you go on and talk about what your experience with amateur radio was, brother.
Yeah, well, when I was in the military, there was Mars, and I forget what Mars stands for. You probably know.
Yeah, military affiliated radio system. That's how I got my start too.
Yeah, Mars Radio, and if people who've been in the military, they know that sometimes you get to do extraordinary things, and sometimes you get to do things that extraordinarily suck too. But sometimes you get to do extraordinary things, just because nobody else volunteered, and they needed somebody to run the Mars station, and I was like, well, what's that? And it looked neat. And so, pretty much there, you're just talking back to the U.S. and you're just sending notes back and forth. And it really is a bit, for today's times, you might say antiquated. It's more of a system I think they would use if communications weren't working. But regardless, it's great. I think the whole thing ran out of a Connex box, and so you had your little office in there, and you just sent notes back and forth. So it was fun, and that was my intro to radio. But also, my dad was an electronics technician in the Navy, and he did a lot of RF, radio frequency stuff, and so I grew up around vacuum tubes and oscilloscopes, and so I always liked electronics, and so I listened to Art Bell too, and he, was really into amateur radio. I mean, Art Bell in a big way was, and that kind of sparked my interest. Yep. I thought, yeah, that's neat. It's kind of hard to listen to Art Bell for years and not have an interest to eventually get an interest in amateur radio. So, got my license, and I'm KG6 ITC, and I've been that forever, and You know, I have not done a lot of amateur radio as far as, big rigs with big antennas talking to people around the world. Mostly it's 2 meter on a handy talkie, a handheld, or 6 meter a little further. So, I'm not quite the great, ham radio operator, but I certainly do like it. And I love the idea that it was, created to foster international discussion. And that's a great thing about it. And also, it's evolved through time because to get your license is not too hard, but it's not easy either. It's about as hard as getting like your I would say your hunter's training certificate,
Yep.
your hunter safety certificate in a state. It's about equivalent to that, maybe a little harder. But what I like about it is, well, it's changing through time. So originally it was about learning electronics, learning about radio frequency. Part of the test to get your license was doing Morse code, and they finally let the Morse code part go. Now you can get that license if you'd like. That you can say, yes, I'm certified, I can do code. But basically, it's changing, and I've been sad to see it, slowly die. It's like a lot of things. It's like the Elks Club. I love the Elks Club, and I love the VFW and the Foreign Legion and things like that. I like it, but when you walk in there, it's kind of sad. There's just 4 guys on oxygen tanks playing cards, and it's just sad. And I realize that the Elks Club will probably just die. It'll go away. But as we've talked about in the past recently, and a great, I think, theme today, or part of our theme as we're talking, is you never know how things are going to work out. You never know, because amateur
Indeed.
radio, which has been dying, really dying, and it's a very sad thing, and it's dying for a lot of reasons. But now we have preppers, and it's just like you didn't used to see books on yoga at the bookstore, and now, well, there's whole damn aisles for that. You see, you can be in Safeway and you see magazines on prepping. There's like Off Grid is one by Recoil Magazine. There's Backwoods Survival Guide. There's more than I can even remember. And they're actually good magazines. So it's funny. Magazines which were dying are now making a comeback. And I think part of that comeback is that there must be 6 or 8 really good, if not 12 really good prepper magazines. There's always been gun mags, but now there's these prepper, self-reliance, backwoods, magazines. And one of the things that's happening with preppers, and preppers didn't exist that long ago. I guess they've always existed, but let's just say prepping is going mainstream now. There's magazines about it to the point that it's becoming a bit of a magazine resurgence. Preppers like amateur radio because it's a way to communicate when the grid is down, and you can do a lot of things with amateur radio. You can send video. It's not that great, but you can send video with it. Also, if a person is into cryptocurrency, you can do cryptocurrency transactions over amateur radio. There's a lot you can do. And so this beautiful thing, amateur radio, which seemed to be a sad, dying part of our culture, is now making a resurgence because of preppers. And that's the thing where you never know what's going to happen. You never know how things are going to go. I would not have guessed that was going to happen only a year ago. But now I see this resurgence of amateur radio thanks to preppers. Now it's getting to be operator to have an amateur radio license. And I think that when we have, weapons training schools offering amateur radio training, that's going to be amazing. And when we start seeing magazines like Recoil and Off Grid and, Prepper as Fuck and whatever, all these amazing magazines which have good content start to have chapters, sections, articles on, amateur radio and getting your license and how you can communicate with it. And they have cool pictures of operator guys with the beard and the tats and the amateur radio and the AR, amateur radio on one hand, AR in the other, looking concerned. Some nice like makeup dirt put on their face,
Oh yeah. No,
if we can make amateur radio operator, like they've always called it, like an amateur radio, like a radio operator, an amateur radio operator. Well, let's make amateur radio operator, and that's what we need. I mean, if you can link if oh gosh, well I'll let you take it because I could go on forever. I'm just thinking of ideas of how we could make amateur radio operator.
Well, we did talk about the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the American Legion in our conversation, which was epic, but it really is sad that the new veterans, and I do believe that this is how veterans back from World War II, Korea, I mean, shit. I posted something today that Lee Marvin, a lot of people don't know, he was a Marine on Saipan, a Hollywood actor. Guess where he's buried? He's buried at a military cemetery, and what does it say on it? United States Marine PFC. He would rather be known as a Marine PFC than as a Hollywood actor. So these are facts. Anyways, the point being is we got to talking about that, and they are dying, and they need to stop dying because those organizations, just like ham radio, and we are blending it now, which is awesome. I'm glad we're doing it. Off Grid, American Survival Guide. I'm just listening to them, Backwoods Home. All these different organizations that are there, or magazines that are out there, they're trying to do it something as a magazine because it's a more, and they still have an online look at. They're trying to give you that tactile feel. Somebody, on my last gig in Afghanistan, was like, "Why do you write letters home?" I said, "There's nothing better than to fill a paper and a pen in your hand writing it." "Well, we just use email." Well, one day you may not have email, the old postman thing. What I have up, just real quick so people understand the pictures, 2 pictures I have, is I have a antenna kit that came with the prick. On this one, I have a Prick 25, which is the tubed version of a Prick 77, what we carried in the 80s. You can buy them from places like Fair Radio in London, Ohio, if it's still around. Bob's a great guy if you guys go there. The other one is a TA1, okay? And that works off the piezoelectric thing, but it travels by wire. It's a little more secure as long as nobody taps into it. That's kind of the squad level thing. And that's operator as fuck. But I'm going to take you through all the way down to my Conex box, my museum, the history of what I've done. Through pictures. I'm not going to get into all that shit, but it's a collection of gear. It's a collection of memories. Sometimes they're hard to let go. But yeah, that's my point, I guess, with the show, is that I do want to show people also during this show that Survivalist, back in the 90s when Clinton was president, there was really no problem under Bush except for one guy, Randy Weaver, and of course he won a $6 million lawsuit when they killed his wife and son. But that's another story, and we're not getting into that tonight. I'm staying off politics. The point is under Clinton, survivalist became a poison word. From '79, I had a magazine, I still have it somewhere, called Future Shock. And it was a Fangora kind of sci-fi magazine, and it was talking about survivalists. Now that conversation, even though they vilified survivalists, think about this, folks, survivalists were the racists back then. That's how they painted everybody who was. It didn't matter if you were black and white. As a matter of fact, under Clinton, when he was doing that, there's a black guy by the name of John Jameson or something like that. He was from Ohio, and he was the head of the organized or unorganized militia in Ohio, one of them, and he was a black man. And he was on, trying to think of the name of the show, it wasn't Maury Povich. Anyways, they blast this dude and really went after him. And it was kind of sad to see the levels they went after people. But yeah, So everybody's always a racist that don't agree with the government, right? And it tends to follow. We also had a conversation. Tim Pool stated this, which was a fact from his experience somewhere, and I don't know where he was at when he experienced it, but he was like, there was John Brown Revolt or whatever the hell Antifa's little armed version is, and Oath Keepers. And he said they both got together, they had their guns out, and they're talking to each other. And he said they're talking about their guns, they're finding commonality. And this is another part of the conversation we had, is that wouldn't it be funny, because we both know an armed society is a polite society, but wouldn't it be funny if the way to actually bridge the gap, now that the left are buying guns, is that they realize the value of firearms? And that's just my 2 cents. You can riff from there, and I'm going to push up another photo, and I'll tell everybody what that is after you're done talking, brother.
It would be great, and it would be operator as fuck, if America was brought back together. I don't like that new agey term, healed, but, healed. Like America's divisions right now, because we're definitely polarized. I would maybe use the word mind controlled more than polarized.
Yep.
The zombie, the zombie apocalypse really is upon us, and people are very, very controlled. There's a great show. I know it's kind of Hollywoody, it's kind of goofy, but I do watch some silly things once in a while. There's a TV series, Stranger Things, and there's season 3 happening right now. And if you watch it, it really it is, if you take it metaphorically, it's showing how people are mind controlled by dark forces. And to me, I think it's real, even though metaphorically it's real. And so we have a lot of people who are not thinking. They really refuse to. The non-player character analogy is sadly very, very accurate.
Yep.
And, but the thing about guns, and you're right, where you've got the left, you could say, you have like the Antifa crew and such, who are now loading up and learning about guns. There's this inherent decency within the gun community that the moment they enter it, like if they start going to, firearms training, they start meeting good people of good character. And then you see, the next thing you'll see is it could be the Proud Boys or whoever, and then like the Antifa who are talking guns. They're like,
Yeah.
Oh wow, you got a floating hand grip on that. Do you like a 16-inch barrel or an 18-inch or this or they start talking guns, and it would be great if the Second Amendment, if the decency of the Bill of Rights, the inherent decency of the Constitution and the American people, really through the Second Amendment, through people of warring factions getting together and shaking hands and agreeing that guns are friggin' cool, right?
Wouldn't it be epic if you think about this, brother? I'm laughing too. Wouldn't it be epic if the Second Amendment actually saved the First Amendment? Because without a fired shot, because people start appreciating their rights. I've gone off ad infinitum on my channel, brother, on, like I said, this is a time capsule here. And I've gone off ad infinitum on, this could happen, whatever. But the one thing that I never saw, Tim Pool, a liberal, a natural leftist, way left of me. Of course, I'm just to the right of Attila the Hun, but whatever. The funny thing is, I listened to him, and he made that statement, and I thought, there might be hope. That might be the cure to bring everybody to appreciate their civil rights are actually their Bill of Rights. And I learned that at Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and at my other place with my first federal agency, is about the Bill of Rights. And it might bring people back to civics, basic civics, and polite conversation where you can agree to disagree. Your thoughts?
Definitely. There's a cool book, I think it's called like the 5,000-Year Experiment, and it talks about how, like the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, it kind of gets into the idea of, governments more and more understanding that the sovereign individual is really where the power comes from. It's a neat book, and it shows the evolution of, government treaties, I guess you could say, with the people, and how it makes the argument that over the last 5,000 years we've become more free, and it makes the argument that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the freest any people have ever lived with a government. And so I think it is true. So if you get the left and the right into firearms, and maybe it's newer to the left, it is going to inherently drag them into it's funny, but a more decent world. They start seeing happy, functional families. They see, a functional way of thinking. They see people that are responsible. I mean, it's very, very unique, and it reminds me of something I've always been very, very moved by is the Christmas truce of 1914. And that was, I think it's defined, if I read it here online, it's defined very, briefly as the Christmas truce was a series of widespread but unofficial ceasefires along the Western Front during World War I around 1914. And this really happened. So you've got, you got the Germans on one side, Europeans on the other, and all these people are fighting. Well, you know what? The civilians, the soldiers didn't have any reason to fight. The governments did. And so it was Christmas, and everybody kind of yells over the sides of their, yells over their trenches, hey, what's going on? Because people kind of been yelling back and forth, communicating anyway. And people broke out playing soccer, trading cigarettes, eating together. And there's videos of this. It's old film, but it does exist today. And there's pictures of this. And the issue was that the generals, the military leaders, had to start giving harsh. They really start coming down on people to get them to fight again. People didn't want to fight. They were like, well, we were just playing soccer and we were talking guns.
Yeah. I mean,
and
that's
so
cool.
So if you throw the Proud Boys and the Antifa, a soccer ball and get them playing soccer and trading smokes and talking about, guns. I mean, there you go. Then you're going to have the Christmas truce of, 2019 there you go. So anyway, Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights, it's magical and it's infectious. And like I say, the interesting thing I've been thinking about today is you never know how things are going to turn out. Supposedly the Second Amendment, which is so awful and so terrible, yes, it could truly be the operator as fuck Christmas truce of 2019 when the Proud Boys and the Antifa just start playing soccer and drinking together and going to the range, getting their hunter safety certificates and hunting together. I mean, there you go.
No,
Case closed.
I agree with you. I mean, even Paul McCartney came out with a video over that, and it's called "The Pipes of Peace," folks. If you want to, I was going to try to play it, but I'm not going to because the other songs I want to play are a little more important. But the point is just like right now, I have an attenuator that's on the right-hand side as you look at it. That was a way to track from a PRC, either 25 or 77, another signal. And so you could actually track. It looks like a weird antenna thing. You'll see what it looks like. But you plug it in, all the wiring's there. And then I have a power source, which is multi-power source from 110. You can read it all. It's all up there. You can see everything you could do with it. And I'm going to switch photos here now. And then I want to get on to the this is a more close-up of the power source and the batteries that I'm going to display. The battery that you can get to replace, because you can't really buy them anymore, the BA4386. And we can all discuss that a little later. But like I said, even ham radio. Look, I can't think of his name. Now, I got to bring us back for a second because of something you said. It's called The 1,000-Year Leap, or 5,000-Year Leap. That's the name of that book.
Okay,
I've read
yeah.
it. Yep. It just hit my mind, so I had to bring that up. Sorry, brother. I'm not correcting you. I'm just telling you.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I forgot. I was struggling to remember the title of it.
Yep, and you'll see that the interesting part is not just you brought this up, man, and it was so very correct. Once you own a firearm, you realize you're responsible for anything that comes out of that other end of the tube. And that's why people are less likely to launch something out of there, because there is no taking it back. You could kill a kid, somebody not even involved. Do you think that doesn't play in a soldier's mind or a Marine's mind or a CB's mind? You know, fight and build is a CB motto. You know that, brother. And
Oh yeah.
And so we are responsible for our rounds. And we could be diametrically opposed to each other politically, and it would not matter to me, not in the least, as long as we could find a common civil tongue. And the left was very big when Trump got elected, saying there's a lack of civility. And also when Obama got elected, if you pushed back against him, you're a racist and there's no civility. No, he was a Maoist. Well, not him. Michael was a Maoist, and Obama was a Marxist. She was, she, whatever, was always more hardcore than he is. And what you're seeing on the, without getting into politics, and I know I just did, sorry, I dipped my toe in that weird shit.
That's totally fine.
My point being is that you were being criticized first as being not having civility by the mainstream media, the propagandist in it. And yet they're deleting everybody on YouTube for hate speech or whatever they want to call it. And I'm sorry, but hate speech is not a thing in the U.S. What is a thing in the U.S. is freedom of speech. And for some reason, I'm sure those people that Tim Pool saw disagreed diametrically with each other, but they found a commonality. And just like you said, brother, that's a thing that really amped me to do my 200 show with you, is that I knew from that video that he said, that's the way I believe. I believe if armed people meet each other, they're less likely to be morons and hit each other with bike locks or billy clubs or anything. They'll just be shaking each other's hands, going into the range, talking. I'm sure as a trainer myself, I've trained people that did not agree with me at all. And that's okay. They knew the law. If you fuck up, you're going to prison. Just like I would, just like you would, right, man? I'm sorry, I just went too long.
Oh no, you didn't. You did not at all. Yeah, because people don't. Something I do like about the you could say the left, people who have not usually owned guns, feeling that they need to, because they think they're going to be rounded up and put in the train, which is just that's not correct in the first place. But regardless, right? They feel the need, and it's great because we have people getting into firearms who truly don't know about them. So they tend to go down the right path of learning. There's so many great places that have intro to guns, intros to handguns. You get your concealed carry license if you have that in your state, if you're able to, etc. And so from what I've heard from people who are trainers in different schools around town and such like that, is that you do have a lot of people who are getting into firearms now who truly wouldn't have. So, but once you enter that culture, and I just would consider it, I just call it like a very decent, kind, good culture. I mean, the next thing you want to do is start going to fun stuff, like you go to the range, but also like here in Arizona, USPSA, I believe they call it. I forget what that stands for, but pistol shooting, usually against steel or paper targets, and you compete, which you're only really, unless you're super good, you're only really competing against yourself. But the idea of you're drawing, you're holstering, you're going through obstacles, you're shooting, it's really, really, really fun. And so when they go and do that, and they meet all these decent, good people, they start going, well, these people that I'm supposed to dislike, I'm kind of here as an undercover agent, sort of, right? I like them,
Well,
exactly.
this is something I have to interject on real quick. When I went to Iraq, and I will post that photo up lastly, in training Iraqi police, there was a guy, his name's Lieutenant Agil, it's his last name, whatever. I'm not getting into his whole stuff because then that would make him a target. But the best meeting I had with any Iraqi that I knew, this is how I should meet people. And the same thing in Afghanistan. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but the point being is he's looking at me like sideways in his eyes and sort of like dubious, looking all whatever. And I'm looking at him the same way. Well, that gentleman, along with Hyder, became two of my best friends from that operation. And it was because they showed honor. They showed loyalty. And it was not freely given. It was earned. I had to earn it, and they had to earn it from me, and both of us knew that. And the thing about Hyder, he was in the first Gulf War too, brother. And you hear about these get-togethers from the guy, I'm trying to think of what, Shark Hunters. He's a book writer from Shark Hunters where he brings, his name's Cooper, last name's Cooper. He brings World War II veterans together, or brought them together, and he said there was a fraternity where there was no hatred of each other, and they had fought a bitter war. And I experienced that myself, from the Gulf War, and then, whatever. Anyways, people believe what they want, but the fact is, there's more than two, but those are just the two I'll talk about. And epic men, and we met on friendlier terms, and friends for life. I can still go back to Al Qaeda, Iraq, and not have to worry about getting gacked. I could take my family there, honestly. Just want to break down the two pictures I have before I bring you back, brother, is this battery adapter that I gave you is from, it's called Instructions for a 257477BA battery adapter. It's by a company. I'm pulling out the stuff. You can find it on prc68.com. And it is, try to tell you the name of the company. I saw it earlier. It's out of Ukiah, California. So anyways, that's that. And then the other one is the showing you the cabling for the multi power source for the PRC 25 or the 77. And with that being said, brother, it's all yours. Switching pictures.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of sum up the topic we've been talking about is people coming together and the way culture changes, and you never can really predict it. And so I definitely like the idea of, gun culture, something that we can agree on, everyone can agree on once they get into it. And things are infectious. One thing leads to the other, leads to the next. And there's one thing about learning about firearms, and it's one of the things I always recommend to people, because people will, ask, you often get asked, what should I do, where should I start, etc. And I oftentimes recommend to people to take a course, and they have them here in Arizona. We're a very gun-friendly state, maybe the most gun-friendly state. And I would say
I love Arizona, brother.
Oh, it's great. It's great. And I tell people to take a deadly force course, because they exist, like the use of deadly force law, really, because there are courses on it, and a lot of tactical training places, or just weapons training, they offer those, and some of them are very good. And something I saw when I was living in Seattle, when I took some of those courses and when I took different firearms training there, was how there were people there who were very left. You know, the people that you would see probably in their Antifa gear, right? Or at least people who are not,
Right.
friendly to things like the Constitution and such, right? I would see a lot of them in the courses, and they would have this kind of like internal breakdown, sometimes kind of an external breakdown, but it was very, very challenging for them because their worldview started to change. Because what was happening is, like you're talking about responsibility and accountability for your bullets, basically, they never really lived in a world where people were accountable and where, societal norms of decency might actually have a value. And now all of a sudden they were. And what would happen is, like, legally justified deadly force, and of course this is not legal advice. I'm an idiot. Do not listen to me, people. No chance. But basically, you go down the line of you legally justified force, they count down ability, opportunity, jeopardy, and then you might want to think about preclusion. And that's like from a lawyer's perspective. Well, you go to a course and they break that down. And it gets into accountability. It gets into, if somebody's breaking into your car out front, is it, and you go outside and you aim a gun at them, is that legal? And, they'll take the course. You might be surprised. And all of a sudden people start thinking about these things. And then they use a lot of cases that are very publicly known, not to incite people, but so that people have heard about shootings that have been in the media. And I don't want to even mention them, but just shootings that got a lot of press, especially during the Obama years. And they say, well, let's break this down legally. And how does this work? And see, all of a sudden, people who are very to the left, you might say, started having this breakdown where they're like, wait a second. You mean there's these things like responsibility in this world. There's these things like accountability. Like if you do stupid shit, you might get shot. There's things like I'd never actually – it's weird, but it is literally a world they'd never actually been in or considered. And all of a sudden they would have to take breaks, and you'd see them out there like really having this like rethinking their damn lives. I'm serious, just because they were like, oh, wait a second. You mean, well, a lot of them are told, and they would come to these courses because they wanted, I guess, well, they were interested in, firearms because they were scared of being put in trains and hauled away. But they were told that, like we lived in Washington, it's not a stand your ground state, but it was the same thing, castle doctrine, stand your ground, etc. But they don't officially do castle doctrine, but it's implied through whatever. I forget how they put it, but it's basically, you could say, a castle doctrine or stand your ground state. And they were told that means that you can shoot anybody you want.
Yeah.
And they really believed that. And they start taking this course and they go, oh, wait a second. Reality, that's not – I've been fed bullshit. That's not reality. And then they just start thinking about their own integrity and their own dignity, Well, do you have the right to defend yourself? You know what I mean? Anyway, I don't want to ramble on it too much, but that's going to have last thing I'd really mention about it. And also, there's a great channel, Red Elephants in the Room by Vincent James. He's kind of like the right-wing version of Tim Pool, and he talks in some of his videos about, we want to get together, we want to start communicating because we don't want to have a violent rebalancing of America, of our culture, our country. And I look back at history and I think about, World War II, after World War I or during World War I in Germany, at the end, that's when the outlaws or the free corps were kind of formed. And, while the men were off fighting, and women too, in World War I, Lenin had a real hard on for a socialist Germany, and they were pumping in lots of propagandists and they were pushing socialism there. So the World War I vets come back and they have, a lot of hardcore violent socialist push. And so the Free Corps were basically World War I vets and people who were too young to get into that war, who basically there was blood in the streets of Berlin. I mean, they were duking it out fighting the communists from taking over their country. And they won. Then, of course, well, as you know, historically, everything kind of went wrong after that. So, but basically, we don't want that in this country. And I fear that, there are a lot of people who want our country to continue functioning. Like, I want grandma to be able to go and get her insulin. I want people to be safe. I don't want there to be roadblocks and things like this, or like where you have like Antifa or something telling people they can't use this road now because it belongs to the whatever. And so I fear for our country, in that I don't want to see a rebalancing where the decent people have to take over because basically shit's going crazy, and it could happen. And since I don't want to see that, my hope is, like we've been talking about, that the Second Amendment and, Proud Boys and Antifa shake hands because, they want to go to the range and go shooting. They want to go hunting together. They want to go and listen to the 5,000-year leap and and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
Who doesn't want to go trap shooting? Trap shooting just makes you happy. Shooting the clay pigeons they fire up there. And I can tell you, well, I don't be too long-winded, but when I was very much more politically active when I lived in Washington State, and we used to do this thing called the legislative shoot every year. And Washington Guns, waguns.org, they used to put on, and I used to help, the legislative shoot, and we got everybody from the state legislature, from the left and the right. They would all come out and they would compete. It was like a shotgun shoot. It was 22, and it was a 22 rifle, and also a pistol, and they all shot targets. And they all try to get the highest score. And they're all very, 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 very competitive. And literally everybody would come out and they would shoot and they'd compete because they wanted to beat each other. And even a very, very to the left guy in the state government, I forget his name, but he was blind. And he actually went out and he shot, under supervision, of course. And what happened was, and it's so great, is they loved it so much. There was so many staffers who then were going out and buying guns after, who were getting into, because they were properly introduced into the culture. And then they wanted to get involved. They're like, hey, how much does it cost to get in? I want to start trap shooting, and it was a great thing. And as you walk down, if you walk through the government buildings there in Washington, you'll oftentimes see in cubicles and on office doors sometimes, people have their targets hanging up from the previous year.
Yep.
See, and that's how we get them.
Well, are you ready to laugh? Belly laugh harder than you've ever laughed. The mayor of Charlottesville, I bodyguarded in Afghanistan in 2010 for Democracy International, along with a HuffPo reporter by the name of Trish DeGennaro. The mayor of Charlottesville is Mike Signer. Well, I called him Signer, and he corrected me and said it was Signer. I don't know if he thought I was trying to insinuate something. I have no idea. But, like, when we would talk politics, he was the head of John Edwards' campaign, by the way. And he actually got me to move a little bit on John Edwards. Because he said, no, John Edwards' gun thing was misrepresented in the media, and I believed him. Anyways, I'm not going to get too deep into this because, trust me, I can. But the interesting part is, the night before everything went on, I had to bring him and Trish in, and I had to say, look, this is how these guns work. And it was just me and an Englishman, Andy. That's all I'll say on his name. He's a good man. Andy was, okay? And we had flip-flopped for reasons. He became TL when I was TL before, and I became his 2IC. I don't have the ego that I have to be the TL, and I was the only American TL on that mission. And anyways, to get back to the point, I showed them how to operate the Glock clone we had from Smith & Wesson, which can't be sold here in the U.S., but we do sell it outside the U.S., in war zones especially, and the AK. And I had to show them the functionality, how to do different things. And he asked the best question. He goes, why do I need to know this? I said, because there's two people that really have your interest in mind and in heart, and that's me and Andy. And now I'm in the 2IC role, so that's my job, train people up. And I train them basically on those two weapons. Both of them said at the end of it. Now, Trish lives in like I said, she's a HuffPo rider, lives in New York and cannot own a firearm, in the city, an AK or a pistol, unless she gets a license, a very specific license, actually. But he's like, I'm going to buy one of these. And that's kind of interesting to me that those two were super liberals. They're in a war zone. And they actually were like, thanks for showing us how to do this. And it's because, look, here's why I give the Come to Jesus Moment talk with all my clients. My job is not to go home. My job is to get you home. If everything goes sideways and it's a bad day, you'll be leaving with the driver. I guarantee you that. But that means I'm not leaving with them. My return trip's not guaranteed. I will do everything to make sure their return trip is guaranteed, and neither of them agreed with me politically. That's the disconnect you have to have in my business. With that being said, I have a picture up right now of close-up so you can see the power source, also see the front end of the knobs. I'm not going to get in-depth on it. If you want that, me and Craig can do a more in-depth thing on this. But I'm about to pull up a book and show you what an AN-2902, which is a 40-foot mast antenna, looks like. And you're also going to get a little peek into my museum. So here we go. Your thoughts, brother?
Oh, well, I can't see the pictures, but
no, I meant on what I just said.
Oh yeah, no, I would have to just say I agree with you. I get you. I mean, I think it's, I don't even know how to expand upon what you said. I would have to just say, yeah, I agree. Sounds good to me, because you pretty much put it very well.
Well, I mean, it dovetails into our entire thought today on the Second Amendment might be the cure for all of this. And yet you have so many people on the left that think it's such a bad thing. It's not, folks. Embrace it. As we used to say in the military, embrace the suck. That means embrace what you don't like. And guess what? You might actually find something that you didn't think you would know. And it might make you a better person.
It's very true. It's just kind of like the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts. That's the idea, is that you become involved as a youngster and it makes you a better person. And I think that's maybe the missing link that many people don't understand who didn't grow up around guns, is that ultimately the Second Amendment is kind of a gateway amendment to the rest of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and ultimately it's a gateway to good character and responsibility and such. So that's something I hope I could, or we can, and maybe we have just gotten across to some people, is that maybe what you've been told, the culture you've been told exists, just doesn't really, because I know I saw it in Washington State quite a lot, where there were people who really thought that, they had a fear of guns because they thought that, anybody who bought a gun because of stand your ground could shoot anybody they wanted, and they thought cops could shoot anybody they wanted, and they thought that the culture was a culture that hated them, and the truth is, once they got involved and they took, training, they realized that no culture, nobody hates you. We want you to do the same as anybody else, obey the damn law, right?
And excel. Honestly,
yeah, excel.
I love it when people outshoot me. Don't you?
Oh, I do. And it's great when people find they have a natural knack for it, and it's exciting. And so, yeah, it is a great gateway. The Second Amendment is a gateway drug to the rest of the Bill of Rights. And honestly, some of the great character and culture that America is, I mean, it's just in our blood. It's a funny thing. Second Amendment is it's in our bone marrow. Shooting's in our bone marrow. It really is. It's just deeply part of being an American and some of the best that the country has to offer, because that's the thing. People might think that the Second Amendment or guns are simply about themselves, but no, they're not. They're really about just some of the deep foundation of good character and strength that really made the country. I mean, and that's really, we are like one of the only armed countries in the world, and it's why we're badass. It's part of our success. So, yeah, I would just say, hey, people, come on over. We're not all like Ted Nugent.
Well, remember,
we're a little bit more civil.
Remember,
like yeah.
Remember that movie, The Secret to My Success? I think it was Michael J. Fox back in the day. Is I'm there 24 hours a day. And that, I think, they really get. The two pictures I have up is Power Up by Dave Strum. That's a book that you should own if you own these. And this is Mars stuff. This is military-affiliated radio system. And there's even ways that I can patch a telephone call through this system. And you can talk to your son, your daughter, who's in the military, left or right. There's never something that tells you that, oh, they're on the left or they're on the right. No, it's about you maintaining communications. I did this on Okinawa, Japan. There's a Mars station on Camp Kinser and every other base. I'm telling you, folks, he gave you his thing, I'll give you mine. I'm KC8UOI. I don't mind anybody stopping by. We'll have a chat if you disagree with me. We'll keep it civil. I'll make sure of it, and you should make sure of that too. But, the truth is out there, and the proof is in the pudding. And neither of us are trying to lie to you or manipulate you. The media is trying to manipulate you, honestly. And they'll probably pull my channel. Did you want to take a break? I'm going to put the 40-foot mast. It's more of a close-up. What I did with the last one was the book and just the grouping in my Konex box somewhere that's out there. And it has my ATV and all the other war bullshit that I've collected in my life. So it's up to you. We can take a break for a minute, man.
Oh, sure, yeah. I could take a break for a minute. And yeah, I think we've definitely, driven that topic home. I think that there's a lot of people who would like to meet more people. They'd like to have more friends. A lot of people are somewhat alone in the world, And I've always said, whether you're looking for a new relationship or you're just looking for friends, whatever, I've always told people, pursue your interests and you will find, friends or who you're looking for in a relationship. Pursue your interests and that's how you find them. And so, if a person would like to meet more people that are truly decent, good, kind people who actually are the kind of friends that would get your back, that if you ever get stuck in a Turkish prison somewhere, they'll come get you out. I hope that doesn't happen to you, but, but basically, do some firearms training. You don't have to even own a gun if you don't first. Take a deadly force law course, take basic, firearms training.
Hell, you can rent that gun, right?
You can rent. You can go to a lot of ranges, a lot of places. It's like, it's a shooting range, but they have these great courses. And part of the course, it's a couple evening it may not seem possible, but for people who don't know, trust me, it truly is. A couple hour course in the evening, intro to firearms, safety, etc. You will be out there in a couple hours looking forward to trying different guns. You will want to shoot different guns at the range, and you'll feel safe doing it, and you'll feel safe around other people who are doing it. And that's where, if you would like to meet maybe the best quality people you're going to find out there, that is a way to do it. That's where I'll take a break.
That's fine, brother. Take a break, and I'm going to play a song, and I'm going to acapella it. So if you do want this recording, you're going to have to YouTube download since you can't hear the music, brother.
No problem. I'll be back in a minute.
All right, God bless. Now, here's the thing that I'm about to play. Gary Sinise Foundation. If YouTube, and when they ban it, I don't monetize, folks. You all know this on my channel. But Five Finger Death Punch, Brantley Gilbert, Brian May, from Queen, by the way, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, together for Blue on Black. And I'm sorry, but you're going to have to suffer through the song, and then we'll come back. You'll hear everything. Unfortunately, my brother Craig will not, so he'll be like, who's that squawking mule? But I love this song, especially this version. You remember Brantley Gilbert did Out in the Sticks. It's kind of my theme song, but this song, it's the truth. So here we go. There we go. We're back live and in concert without my foul-sounding voice. No, so the final bits I'll clean up on this is my thought process on ham radio, folks. I made a very concerted point on what everything was about back in the day. And I talked to everybody about, if they take your voice away on YouTube, you still have a voice. You have ham radio. Just remember, get a license. They used to have, and we talked about this, the most common way that people get licensed, it starts at 100 watt for an FM station. Now remember, the radio stuff that I showed you is FM. Now if you have a license, if you bleed into people's stuff, it's not a problem for you. If you're not licensed, what you'll have, before 1980, you were able to apply for a 10 watt Class D educational station license with less money in the bank than you believe, like $750. But somehow they shut that down. This is what Americans need to get aggravated about. So from 0.5 to 10 watts, community broadcast operations, you know why they were shut down? I'm about to tell you. It's because of PBS. Because we're jumping on PBS. They were bleeding into them. And they shut them down in 1980. And it was a lie by PBS that made them do that. That's back when they had, you remember, and so do I, back in that day, they had that fairness doctrine. And you know who it most offended? Now I'm about to tell you where I got this from. And most offended, the name of the page is www.roguecom.com. Okay? Rogue Radio Research. What affected black people? Think about this. PBS. Yeah, you think they're your friends? Think again. And it was produced by two Antifa organizations, actually. Committee on Democratic Communications. Actually, it's the attorney, Peter Frank, attorney at law, Frank Law Offices, out of San Francisco. So that's where that comes from. But like earlier, Craig said, you can find the IRLP and just look that up, irlp.net, and then you had another one you shared with me on the interwebs. Do you have access to that you can speak on, brother?
Oh, yeah. As far as some of the cool amateur radio projects that are out there right now, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So something I like seeing with a ham radio or amateur radio is, let me grab my little notes here, is that, like we were saying earlier, it's one of those many things that's a little bit sad that you see dying. And, initially it was about learning about electronics, learning about radio frequency, transceivers and how it works, and then communicating globally. Well, when I thought it was done, when I thought it was over, I found that it wasn't, because of preppers. Preppers are now, there's a bit of a resurgence of amateur radio. And so if we can make, amateur radio as operator, as an AR and a beard and tattoos, well then, it's golden and it's good because it's a good thing. We want to keep it around if we can. So maybe it's not amateur radio's time to die. Now there's some cool projects that are out there that are more timely. I really enjoy this. Now there's one called, let's see, I got it right in front of me. Let's make sure I name them right. Okay, one is called internet-based. Let me just talk about one of them here. There's one. It's called Echolink. The nice thing about Echolink is, and a person can just Google like ECHOLINK, Echolink, and there's actually apps. You can get it for your iPhone or your Android. And if you have an amateur radio license, you're supposed to have your amateur radio license, you can connect to repeaters around the world via the Echolink. So you have an app on your phone, and there's an app on a desktop you can run too, and you can see repeaters around the world. And those are just basically same as a cell phone uses a repeater. You can. I've talked to people in Israel and other countries, and you can just log into that repeater, and you can hear the radio traffic on it, and you can also talk on that repeater. So, a big rig that can talk around the world. Well, that's a bit of an investment in time, in money, and I'm not sure if everyone's going to make that right now. But if you have an interest in amateur radio and you get your amateur radio license, you can use Echolink. And that way you can still talk to people around the world, but you can kind of hop on the internet to do it. And that's really cool. Now there's another one called, I'd have to look it up here. Sorry, I forget the name. I'll remember it while we're talking. I'll let everybody know. There's another one, which is almost, it's the internet-based, I think, radio linking project. And what that one offers is you can go to a local, so you have your radio, you can connect to a local repeater, you can type in a code, and that will connect you to a repeater somewhere else in the world or the country. And so you can actually, through your radio, you can bounce through your local repeater, and it can connect to a repeater, let's say in Israel or Australia or something like that. So there's really great projects out there that are making it interesting. There's also the Amateur Radio TV project, which is where you can stream video via radio frequency. Not highly effective, but it is cool. Where you could actually have a conversation with somebody as if you were on Skype. You can hear and see each other. It works. So there's so many great projects, and what really does impress me, and I really do enjoy, is the internet-based Echolink. Because let's say you want to get your amateur radio license, you don't even need a radio. You can just hop on Echolink, and you can see repeaters in your area. A lot are on Echolink. There's some in Arizona here, and there's some all over the country, all over the world. And you could actually be chatting, doing amateur radio without even a radio. And so that's wonderful. I mean, I'm glad to see that. So I'm glad to see that there are projects that are coming about or that have existed, which are getting some renewed vigor because of the interest in amateur radio. So just when I thought it was done, it's starting to be the next. Now, all of a sudden, I find out I thought it was dead, but now it's operator.
It's operator. Hey, here's the funniest thing. You and I were talking about it, brother. Stay on. You and I were talking about this, and it was like operator as fuck. Look, there's three things that any operator knows, and that's move, shoot, and communicate. You can buy yourself a Prick 68, which is, and it's got all the, you can go to Fair Radio, and if Fair doesn't exist anymore, they're still out there. You can find them. They're like handy talkies, but they're on 6 meter. It's all the military spectrum. You just can't get the dope stuff the military uses, like embedders or, any of that. And you really don't want them because they drop code all the time. And that's another thing, with the military and the police all going to 800 megahertz, you now have a spectrum open to you. Why make it easy for people to listen? Everybody can listen, but why make it easy for people to find you and track you? If you see the FCC vans in your town, there's issues afoot. So, your thoughts on that, brother?
Well, the thing with, amateur radio is it definitely is not an encrypted, type of radio. So, it is truly a community system. So, I mean, which I kind of like. I mean, it becomes like the community party line. So since we
hell yeah
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about the surveillance. Yeah, I mean, if you see it, you're aware of it, etc. But I mean, the internet radio, it's fun, and so and the amateur radio, it's fun, and it's definitely um, open to the public. I think one thing it might make people think a little bit about just the reality that whatever platform you're using, there really isn't any privacy per se, and if somebody has an interest in privacy and communicating between them and someone else, then that's something they need to that's kind of a road they need to go down, because there is encrypted ways of communicating via radio frequency, even amateur
Yep.
radio, and there's ways of doing it. There's ways of chatting in text and then talking, with voice and video even that's encrypted between two peers on the internet and stuff like that. So, encrypted, conversation does exist and is possible, but like I say, and that's when people would have to research themselves. So, but as far as amateur radio, yeah, I mean, it's a party line, and it's fun because if you're listening into repeaters around the world, you'll hear people talking in different languages and such, and it's fun. It's fun. It's that was the idea of amateur radio in the beginning. Truly was. I just to create international conversation because when you have friends in Iran that speak English, unless you speak Arabic or what, I'm not even sure what language they speak there, but let's say they speak English. If you're hopping on the Echo Link, if you're hopping on the internet on your phone or on your desktop and you're using repeaters in Iran, because there are, you'll see them, you can talk to people about life. Hey, what's your life like? Now of course maybe somebody is listening to you and they're wondering, why is this person talking to them? Well, it's not encrypted. They can listen,
Yeah.
You're gonna talk about oh my daughter's getting married. They're gonna talk about
My hemorrhoids. Yeah.
my hemorrhoids. Oh, and then you can say, oh, let me tell you, let me send you this link on Amazon. I know a great roid pillow. Let me tell you, I mean, you can, and so they are talking about a wedding and hemorrhoid pillows. And if the surveillance state wants to listen in on that conversation, well, amen. Maybe they'll get the roid pillow themselves because they spend a lot of time sitting listening to people. So, but yeah, it gets very hard to go along with bombing a country when you literally have friends you would be talking to that you've met there. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things as far as we never know what's going to happen. We never quite know what the future brings. And so, like the Second Amendment, bringing America together, a resurgence in amateur radio, sure, maybe people are doing it because it's operator and they're talking with their little operator squad out in the desert. But still, the next thing you know, it's a gateway. It branches out into using repeaters in other countries and literally talking to our supposed enemies and finding out that, well, they have, weddings to pay for and hemorrhoids too.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. That's you. I muted myself purposefully. You have hit this nail on the head. We'll close out on the thing, and we'll go into survivalism for a few with y'all. Here's the point. The greater point is, I think, First Amendment always is preeminent. That's why you have ham radio. He's not lying. Look, here's the thing, and this will be how I joined the two together. The First Amendment, during time of invasion, this is back during the day when DOD ran everything, and it used to be called civil defense. It's now, after the Stafford Act, it is now called FEMA, okay? Guess what they don't have? If under times of invasion from foreign sources, we're not talking local, we're not talking people who are your neighbors, okay? So don't get this shit twisted. You can use ham radio without a license. A lot of people don't know that. And since we're now going to fluctuate into preparedness, i.e. prepping, what I still prefer to call survivalism, because it's not changed. They just changed the name because, of course, they had to vilify them as all racist, which was bullshit. Anyways, don't want to get into that bullshit. Guess what? under time of invasion by the Chinese or Russians, don't get this shit twisted, folks. If it's a civil unrest, this is not in play. But it never changed. If you convert a weapon of yours to a machine gun, if you carry it, you do whatever, that's for that time only. You're still going to be liable for those bullets civilly. And that's another thing I think we did miss on talking about guns. Even if you have a castle doctrine, whatever, you may not get prosecuted criminally, state, federal, or local, right? But guess what? You're probably going to get sued by someone. And that's a fact, and that's what wakes most liberals up. That's why I think what Andy No is doing right now, suing political leaders and looking for the people doing it with Harmeet, I can't think of her last name, sorry, brother. They're starting to wake up that, hey, guess what? This shit just got real. And anyway, so we'll move into the gun shit, but your thoughts on that?
And that's the importance of people taking a deadly force law course. And I think that's something that, like I'd mentioned earlier, it really caused a difficult realization and change in worldview for people when they went to a deadly force law course. Because if you take good firearms training, one of the first things you're going to learn is deadly force law. It's important. And they start learning that, well, deadly force law is not about killing somebody. It's not about you can't wait to shoot somebody or whatever. And they start realizing that, like you were saying, the danger of maybe you don't get prosecuted legally, but then, of course, there's civil court. This is things people don't even know. And that's the thing. I think the most important course to take, I actually think what might keep a person safer, I actually would say, if they're new to firearms, is really if you take a course on deadly force law,
yep,
that might actually protect your ass more than a gun would. That's really so important to do that first, because there's no point in surviving if you spend the rest of your life in a cage. And when you start thinking about deadly force law, it actually makes you more situationally aware. It makes you see the world differently, and it makes you think of law differently. It's very unique. So, because people, when they think about deadly force law, it comes down to ability, opportunity, and jeopardy. Those have to all be proven. Did the person have the ability? Was there an opportunity? And could they? Is what it kind of comes down to. And then, of course, once those are passed, that will get you out of legal trouble, hopefully. Then, of course, there's preclusion. So, all of a sudden you're in this bad situation, yep, and your brain, the first thing you think about before even a gun is ability, opportunity, jeopardy, preclusion. And that basically you have so much to think about. People think it's just so simple and easy, and it's not. I mean, defending yourself, deadly force, it is a mental game. And the person who truly knows how to lawfully defend themselves, I mean, there is a lot going through their mind, and it is shocking to some that the gun may not necessarily be the greatest part of it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, it should never be the greatest part of it. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I go by the axiom from back in the day, and I know it's sea-burned now, folks, but I still live old school with NBC, Nuclear, Chemical, Biological Warfare. And it was always TDS. TDS. Time, Distance, Shielding. That is the time when the bullet's launched. We can just break it down that quickly. Distance between you and that bullet, and the shielding between you and that bullet. That's the fact. You don't want to occupy that same space and time of that bullet as it passes through your space and time. So, and shielding will stop it to a point, and distance, hey, if you're far enough away, you'll see the bullets impact in front of you and laugh. So, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not going to stand on my high horse over this. I'm just telling you, you're exactly right, Craig, on this one. So now what I have up as a picture is I have an Explorer 2 pistol, and then there's an AR-7 on the left-hand side. And I have a picture that was taken somewhere, can't say where, the Henry U.S. Survival. That one is actually not anybody, well, it is somebody I know, but the bottom one's interesting one, because what they had back in the day was 25, and then I will throw up some pictures. They also had 10-round mags, and this is where AR-7 comes in, AR7.com. And so this goes from Armalite to Charter Arms, which was the only manufacturer of the Explorer 2, which is a pistol version. You can't use the pistol barrels. They had a 8, 6, and a 4-inch barrel that you could use. But you can't use them on a rifle unless you have an SBR. So, and they made them to where you have to have the right cutout, which is 180 degrees different to the AR-7. So you just can't use them unless you purposefully try to use them. And that's all I'll say on that, which is bullshit if you try to do that. Stay within your laws, local, federal, and state. That's always what I say. But this is a fine firearm. I've done this show with Attendo, his channel. And so now I'm going to do it with Craig, and we're going to have an epic time on survivalism at this point.
And it kind of comes, a good place to start that is, what is a prepper? I mean, and why is that happening? I think there's always been survivalists, and there always was, Soldier of Fortune magazine, which is a bit different maybe, but basically it used to just be natural. Like our great-great-grandparents and our grandparents, they had the victory garden. They would have their, food stocked away.
Yep.
They always bought an extra can of soup when they went to the store. So if you think about it, our grandparents were ready to be 6 months off the grid, most of them, and our great-great-grandparents certainly were. And if you think about it, the settlers who kind of got to America and headed west, I mean, they just straight up were off-grid preppers, and they were, and they had their, Henry lever-action rifle, the first fighting rifle, I would say. Well, arguably, let's say the first one that had a lever, and so basically the way that we live, which has been natural, like the way a natural human would live, the way like basically any Aboriginal culture would live, and the way all of our ancestors lived until very, very recently, it was just natural. You were just ready kind of for anything. You were a bit of a prepper, I mean, they weren't quite as operator. They just had a closet full of extra things, and then they had like a 38 special revolver, was their firearm. You know what I mean? It was like, it was toned down a bit. It was more humble, but yet it was there. And now we call it prepping, and you have to use, an AR, and you got to have tats and some muscles, and, anyway, what has happened? Like, where do you think preppers came from? We're taking what's always been natural to now it's then it kind of got demonized. You might say prepping is bad, and prepping does get demonized in many, many ways. But yet, even though it's being demonized, it's kind of like the Second Amendment. There's a lot of people who are like, guns bad, but yet you go to the magazine store, there's a lot of magazines about guns, and people are damn happy and proud of them, and they're having a great time. And it's kind of like prepping, prepping bad. You can't collect your own rainwater. You can't have a pond, et cetera. I even heard of crazy legislation about, stockpiling food being wrong. If
that's actually been enacted, bro.
Yeah, I wasn't sure the details on that one other than I'd heard it. But then even like you need a background check to buy ammo. I'm like, well, ask any gun enthusiast how that's going to work, I mean, anyways, and I'm a little long-winded on it, but there's been an evolution from where it was natural to now it's this sort of like renegade kind of like you're rebellious because you're prepping. And there's people taking it so seriously. They're building earth homes, they're building off-the-grid homes. I mean, people in a very short time frame have gone from not prepping at all to being ready for like the friggin' apocalypse.
The funniest part is root cellars. Now, here's something that will probably interest you and you'll laugh about. This is the weekly food ration per adult during World War II. My wife, the only reason I know it, we have several people on her side of the family. My family died quicker than hers. But this is an actual fact. This is what they rationed under a communist, which was Roosevelt, okay? I'm not talking about Teddy. I'm talking about FDR. 4 ounces of bacon or ham. 2 to 3 pints of milk. 8 ounces of sugar. 1 egg. 2 ounces of cheese. 2 ounces of butter. 4 ounces of cooking fat. 2.5 ounces of red meat, or 2.5 pounds of red meat. Now remember, this is per week until I get to this one. 1 pound coffee every 5 weeks. 4 ounces of oleo or margarine. 1 pound preserves. That's jellies, folks. Per month. No, I'm sorry. I just lied to you. Per 2 months. And that's why Victory Gardens, and they were even taking people's chickens and their livestock back then. Now, folks, notice I started out with the gun thing as a joke, kind of, almost. But, and notice I said almost on that. What do you eat a day? Think about this. What do you do a day? What if you had a piggy? Pork wasn't on that list, was it? That's white meat, just like a chicken. Chickens weren't on that list, right? But red meat was. In Arizona, there's plenty of places where cattle graze. And think about this. Look at who they went after that had grazing rights since the turn of the century. Not last one, the one before, from the 1800s. Look, a regulation de facto becomes law. If you think it won't happen, don't forget yourself. Look, here's the point. Under Bush Sr., he was extremely liberal. Then you had Clinton, which caused some issues. And so Bush Jr. loosened up a lot of things. And then look at how many manufacturers of guns were arrested under Obama. After Bush Sr. said, or Bush Jr. said it's okay. Think about this, folks. It's cyclical. You think they won't cut off your food supply? That's something to think on, and I've told this to everybody on my show numerous times. I think this is the first time you ever hear about it, Craig. Under FEMA, and before that it was under, civil defense. The national highways were built to land jets and bombers on during a time of nuclear war. That's fact. And so what you have after that is FEMA maintained that same stance. This will blow you away. Do you know why every city has a ring around it? That little outer belt and the inner belt? Do you know that, Craig?
I do not know.
I'll tell you why. It's to make you have to use back roads to get there because they will shut off anything coming in or going out to it. You live, actually, if you have an outer belt or an inner belt, you live in a place they can cut off and control. That's fact. That's FEMA, man. That's the Stafford Act.
Yeah, I was not familiar with that. I'll have to go look for my inner and outer ring here in Scottsdale, Phoenix area and see, how that actually works. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, find your secondary route.
Yeah. When I lived in Washington, by one of the shooting ranges I like, there was a big, FEMA facility, and it always looked kind of, ominous, kind of. But yeah, the Victory Garden and such, I mean, it's like nobody really wants to be rationed. And I think that there's a lot of distrust of, I wouldn't even say government. You can say government, but also I think that our whole geopolitical world right now, there's so many games being played. Maybe there always has been. People don't necessarily know what's going on. They don't necessarily believe what they hear. We have threats of war. We don't even know if they're real. But it seems there's a certain uncertainty. And something I like seeing that maybe this will be another thing that we never predicted that brings us all together is like prepping. Because here in Arizona, we have something which is very, very alive and well is gathering. I mean, there's mesquite gathering parties where we gather mesquite pods. People are really, really, taking a huge interest in gathering food in the desert because the desert, contrary to popular belief, I thought so when I first saw it, but this is not the case. It rains food. The desert rains food. You look at it, it looks like this desert. It looks like there's no food out there. The desert is trying to feed you, And so once you know how to go out, what, all the different seasons, there's food out there that you can gather, including, well, of course, dates and mesquite and prickly pears and stuff like that. There's agave roots. There's all kinds of stuff. There's also squirrels. There's rabbits. There's little deer running around. And the thing is, when you begin to go out and hunt and gather, and you can just gather if your hunting doesn't move a person, but when you go out and hunt and gather, as you learn your desert, you have this confidence that you're kind of ready. You're more ready for anything. And also, just like I was mentioning how if you want to meet good people, get into some firearm training, you'll meet good people in your local area. You can find them on Facebook pretty easy. Find the wildcrafting groups and go out and learn your land and start picking stuff. And then, truly, wildcrafting is operator as fuck. That's prepper right there, And so there's this resurgence that I see. I see people more and more are out there gathering, and they're just outright prepping. So we see like the Recoil magazine and the Off-Grid, and we see the kind of preppery stuff. But it's funny, like I was looking at an Off-Grid, this great book, great magazine, Backwoods Survival Guide. I was looking at that, and so these things are great. There's one about do-it-yourself projects, all these really, really like how to make yourself a little table out of a log and how to split wood and how to drill a hole, which, well, you should know, but let's face it, some people don't know how to drill a hole.
How to make a root cellar.
How to make a root cellar, and then one is there's this great article on the benefits of black powder firearms, which is just something to think about. I'm like, well, it's great if you're going to be, I don't know, whatever. They're neat, but a whole great couple page section on knot importance, how to tie some of the basic knots, which I suck at. I just recently finally got how to do a bowline down again, and so how to tie knots. And this whole book is not just fluff. It's not just pictures of guys with beard and tattoos holding an AR. There's here's one that will touch your heart, I bet. There's this one it's on natural defense systems. Use Mother Nature's elements to secure your home and property.
Yep.
Have a moat with alligators around your house. It may not sound practical, but as long as zoning is correct, do it. A great conversation piece. I made that up. It's not in the article, but one thing they mention is one thing they mention is like something our great grandparents did and our grandparents did that we don't do now. A great way to keep people from climbing in your windows, put rose bushes under them.
Fuck
So this
yeah.
fuck yeah. I mean, sure, climb through my grandpa's roses. Then you think about it, how sweet that
Well,
your grandpa who loved those roses planted those, and he's taking care of generations to come. Oh man, that's good stuff.
You think about this, brother. I was not trying to be hyperbolic, and don't think I was. I'm just saying that's why that planning was put in place. So please don't. I hope you don't think I'm like telling you paranoia. That's not where it's at.
Oh no,
But
what you're saying is totally true.
There is a fact base to it. I happen to know that. Anyways, I don't want to get into all that. But the point is, it's not just rose bushes. There's a thorn bush that actually will stop a vehicle from hitting, and the government uses them. This is a fact. Fact, folks. Got to remember, I deal in facts. During the Cold War, we had geese moved to our nuke base because they were more reactive. Of course, their wings were clipped, but more reactive to anybody around, and they would give an alarm. And everybody here knows I have dogs. People say, well, get a shepherd, get this, get that. Get a bunch of little dogs. Get beagles. Especially them, they're hyper as fuck. I hate them sometimes, but I love them always. The barking kind of annoys me sometimes. But if there's anything going around your house, you'll know about it. Except for, I will tell you this. You want to laugh your dick off, you will. I had a beautiful picture I took on Facebook of a crane. And you got to understand, cranes are like my favorite bird since Japan. And they're just cool. And he's walking down my creek right next to my house. I took a couple pictures of him. And I was like, that's epic. And my dogs didn't even know. Didn't even know. He's just looking in the creek. It got a little big. There's some fish in there, and he's looking. Folks, there's something about being in tune. And honestly, Radiant Creators had an awesome dude by the name of Jake. If I don't want to say the wrong name, it was Jake, right, brother? Say his full name.
Yeah, Jake. Yeah, I always I'll look it up while we're talking. I always I could not remember his last name, mainly because it's too simple. That's the problem. Jake Richards, the author
Yes.
of Backwoods Witchcraft. Yeah, he has just lived a magical life. I love talking to him.
And backwoods witchcraft is such a misnomer because he's talking about getting back to the earth, getting back to the soil. He wasn't talking witchcraft. That's the coolest part is, look, everybody on my page knows where my Opa came and where he went and where my mother was born. It was West by God, Virginia. And guess what?
Was that?
We learned to respect things. There's something they used to joke around about when I was an iron worker, putting myself through college. They study the 3 R's, reading, writing, and Route 23 coming up to Columbus, Ohio. And it just boggles my mind that I heard today, honestly, listening to a comedian I like, and of course now I'm not real fond of him. Not going to say his name or anything, but they were talking shit about Ohio. I'm an Ohioan. I came back to my state and keep coming back because I have a certain loyalty. Would I love to be in Arizona with my wife, hanging with you? Hell to fuck yeah. Would I love to go to Texas, hanging with Texans? Hell yeah. I lived in both those states. But guess what? My line marches on from this soil. And that's a fact. And it really kind of is sad that we're just flyover country. Of course, they think that about Texas and everywhere else. They're trying to turn Texas blue, whatever. Probably Arizona, too, actually. But it's just kind of sad. Anyways, I'm sorry, dude. I just probably stepped on everything.
No, I like what you're saying. Well, that's something I noticed. It's like, I love America, of course, and there's times when I look at the world, I look at this country, and I start seeing it like an Elks Club or amateur radio, and I start thinking, wow, is it time for it to go? Because there's a lot of people that hate it that are in it. But then I'm reminded of how we don't really know how things are going to turn out. There's always these events that happen that just are unpredictable. You could never have predicted it. A resurgence in magazines, great, good quality magazines because of prepping and homesteading and self-reliance. Magazines are making a comeback. Amateur radio is making a comeback, and then amateur radio, sure, people do it locally at first, but then the next thing you know, they're talking to their friends in Iran and Israel. They are, and then they start saying, wait a second, we can't go to war with Iran because, I got friends that I know, I have people who are getting married tomorrow. You can't bomb them today, because then they realize that, man, people are all the same. They like being happy, making babies, having families. They like pursuing their interests. They don't, everybody's the same. And you realize that, yeah, your culture's different, but you're the same, And so I look at America and I think to myself, I don't know. I think it's a great place. It's a good thing. I think it has this kind of divine protection. There's this great book called The Secret Destiny of America by yes. And I forget, gosh, who wrote it? It's such a simple person who wrote it. Not a simple person, but if I look for it on Amazon, who wrote that? Manly P. Hall. Yeah, I believe so. The Secret Destiny of America. Read that and you realize it's been divinely inspired and helped from the beginning. Phenomenal book. And so I'm kind of watching America going, wow, what's next? Because I have a feeling it's going to do better than it ever has. And you start thinking about maybe some of these good events that are happening. And so, with that, prepping really is one of them. I mean, it seems like somehow everything old is new again. Prepping has kind of a sexy face, but what's really what's really operator as fuck when it comes to prepping is the community. People are wildcrafting together. They're shooting together. They're talking about homesteading together. They're starting to talk about, hey, let's buy land as a community and build a community there that corresponds with our values. One of those might be prepping, self-reliance. It's almost like prepping is this culture which is growing in this country to an extreme. It is growing. And basically what it wants to do is live like our great grandparents and grandparents did, but rather than a 38 special, maybe an AR, and rather than like cans of soup, more techie storable food. And maybe we're not doing a victory garden. Maybe it's hydroponics indoors because it's easier. So really, we're becoming a new, a neo great grandparent.
We are, and honestly, I try to tell the purpose of my channel is to make better men, and I do it only because of my son. He's an Eagle Scout just like I was. Matter of fact, the year after he got his Eagle, they allowed women in the Boy Scouts. Still don't understand that, but whatever. The point being is, I so get you on so many different levels that the only thing I think we might differ on is, and I could be totally wrong and correct me if I am, the unfettered bombardment of both Europe and America with people that refuse to assimilate. And so the victory garden is lost on them. They would be the first people to say, why is he getting 4 ounces of meat? Give him 2 so I can get 6, you know. They always want more. And maybe I'm wrong, but you can fill me in on that if that's your if I'm reading it.
Oh, well, I would say if I think about like from the prepper's perspective, you know, I mean, people are prepping for a lot of different reasons, and I think that could very well be one of them, is cultural change within countries that is, you know, way too fast and not necessarily productive. Because, you know, being on the East Coast, yeah, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. You know, growing up in the East Coast, I saw generations of immigrants, basically, and I grew up in kind of several different countries at once. You know, there was the Italian part of the neighborhood, and a lot of them got here and they had nothing. They just showed up, and they got to work, and they built garages first because bricks were really, really cheap. And so was cement.
Yep.
So they literally camped. They bought a piece of land in the neighborhood. They camped on it. They bought bricks because they just were about free. They were cheap, and they built a garage, a little brick house, and they lived in that while they actually built a larger house on the property. So a lot of, you know, homes there in the neighborhood had these really unique kind of homey looking garages. And then, of course, you had your Germans. We had, you know, during World War II, there was a lot of German POWs here, and a lot of them just naturalized. And so you really, and of course, even before then, it was German immigration, but you really had like neighborhoods that were Italian, that were Jewish, that were German. And
yep. We had them in Ohio, brother.
Yeah. And so and like the Italians were funny. A lot of people don't know where the term WAP comes from, and it's without papers is all it meant, you know. It wasn't such a negative slang term where I grew up. And
yep.
So, and you had, you know, a lot of German and Jewish families and such, and Italians, they owned like all the homes in a certain part of a neighborhood because they just kept buying them as the families got bigger. And so the thing was, they all had a tremendous pride in being Italian and being German and being like North or Southern German was seen to be a big deal. You were a Frank or a this or whatever. And there's all this national pride of where they came from, but they were Americans. Huge difference. You know what I mean? They loved the country. They were Americans. So it's like nothing wrong with, you know.
American first. You didn't see, except for Oktoberfest.
Oh, yeah. Oktoberfest. Yeah, but that was a beautiful offering of their culture, you know. Yeah,
and also with the Sicilians, and you know, I'm half spaghetti nigger, half kraut. With the food, that enriched our country, and even though people say, well, they were mafia, whatever, but you also have to look like Meyer Lansky, a Jewish guy who was in charge of the money for the mafia during Capone's time. You know, everybody always wants to paint people in a certain way, but we have a different, it's not a complexion, please don't get this mixed up. It's a different thought process from the people coming today as they did back then, because they wanted to be Americans, even if they were criminals. They knew they were an American. Now, we have a shit show, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
Oh, no, we do. Yeah, and I was really kind of going to the same place as what you just said is, you know, I grew up in I guess you could say where immigration worked very, very well. You know, proud people of the natural heritage, national heritage before being American. I mean, oftentimes you'd have a couple of generations living there. You know, I grew up around families where the older generations in the household only spoke Italian or German. You know what I mean? And so it was great.
Yep.
And I loved being exposed to all those different cultures, nationalities. But yeah, they were all American and they loved being here and they wanted to be here. And there was just, it really, really worked perfectly. You could have your kind of expatriate national pride, you know what I mean? But you were American. And so right now, the unfortunate thing with immigration is, America is the world's fridge. We're like, oh, are you hungry? Here's some food. Oh, do you need money? Here you go. We really are. We're like an old loving grandma with a big fridge
No,
that
we're
never
the
runs out.
bitch. No, we're the bitch.
Well,
We're
see,
their bitch.
well, the thing is, I think we used to be the grandma with the never-ending fridge, right? But now it's different, and that's the unfortunate thing. And I think I know people look for complexities, but really, I think, unfortunately, what's happening right now is simple. I mean, we don't have to really even dig into it too far, or at least my simple mind doesn't have to. We know what it's about.
I
It's
agree.
about it's about political power. There's one party
Yep.
doing it because they. I mean, I'll never understand people who dig socialism, and I'll never really I think everybody, required reading for me is Gulag Archipelago. I mean,
Yep.
and I don't believe anybody believes in socialism. I don't think anybody, even who's pushing it in our government today, which there are people pushing it, they don't believe in it. They just think they're going to get an armband, is what they think, and they think they're going to
Yep.
be special, And guess what? Study the Soviet Union. Study how that went. I mean, basically, yeah, all the leaders who helped create it were executed. Look. I mean, shit, look at Hitler. He killed shit tons of his generals because, you know what I mean? So you got to realize, like,
Same with Stalin. I mean,
yeah,
and Mao.
yeah. Now, yeah, it's like you got to realize you're not going to be special. You might get an armband and you might be able to. It's just vengeful people who want to hurt others, and they see communism as a way to get an armband and wreak vengeance on all the people they've disliked. That's my take on it. I can't give it any more validity than that. So, unfortunately, we have people in the government who don't like the country. They'd rather
Yep.
have a socialist shithole is what they want. And unfortunately, the mass immigration that we're seeing right now, this whole idea of abolish ICE and DHS and just open the border and let the hordes come in. Hey, bless them, they're humans, and I get it. But I don't. My thing is, I don't understand it. I understand how there's a lot of shenanigans going on, and I don't necessarily know all the details to it. I think I know the end game when they get here. It's turn every state that is a proud state, like Arizona, Washington. Like Washington has Seattle, Arizona's got Phoenix, Texas has Austin. California is actually a proud state. They have San Fran and LA. Every good proud state has cities, and then the cities is where that's why you have sanctuary cities.
That's where it fucks up. They're
Yeah, and
all
then,
run by Democrats.
they're all run by Democrats, and then of course all they got to do is get legislation to have ballot initiatives, and then the people can vote, and supposedly the people have spoken, and then those cities run the damn states. That's what happened to Washington State.
Have you ever been to Detroit? That's a serious question.
I've only driven through it, and at least in recent times, it's kind of horrifying looking.
Yeah,
It's the same
well,
with Buffalo, really. Yeah.
I was stationed there, and yeah, I've got horror stories from Detroit when I worked for Detroit field office for CBP. Yeah, it is the culmination. It's just like Flint, Michigan, too, with the water being all lead and this, that, and the other. It's like you elected these people, and these people didn't. Same thing with New Orleans. They didn't. They used the money the federal government did for everything but levees, and we had the flooding in down there in New Orleans. So it's a fact, and it just misspent money. They keep saying we need. Here's what I'm sick of, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it. It's for the kids. It's for the kids. All this money's for the kids. That's what they've used for decades since I was a kid. When busing ended in Ohio, this is a straight up serious thing. I went to a school called Georgian Heights. It was Columbus City Schools. It got bust. And my cunt ass, I'll never forget what I said, and I'll never forget what I did at that young age. And I'm like, if they want to come here, they should be able to. But I was like 8 years old. Then in high school, honestly, this is so much fun. In high school, I went to Westland High School. That's where I grew up. And I could actually go to Grove City, which is a more white school, but I played baseball. And anyways, it is what it is. It was a good thing that I did it. Also a good thing that I turned down OSU. My point at Ohio State University for baseball. But here's the funniest part. I went in the military instead. Here's the funniest part to me. Is I dated a black girl all through high school. I don't have any hatred. She's still on my page. She's an awesome person. Has her family. Wish her nothing but well. Think highly of her. And yet, you know what? Because of what I just said, I'm the most serious racist out there. Isn't that fucking bullshit that we've allowed our culture to devolve to this?
I think also allowing culture to evolve, to devolve, to degenerate into really not having the ability to have critical thinking, you know. And I look at it like, I just thinking of immigration, for instance. It's that natural immigration used to work great. Like, it was amazing where I grew up. I mean, I grew up in an amazing place that had a lot of immigration over the years, and it was beautiful. It's important. I loved it. I got to grow up in this little heaven. You know, definitely a multicultural heaven. You know, it was great, but. I see it like this right now. Yeah, the immigration that we're seeing right now and the way the government is pushing it, I see it like this. If our nation was attacked by another nation and the soldiers of that nation were all slaves, they were all enslaved, you know.
They'll be right here.
Yeah, they were. It's actually very true. Yeah, they were all conscripted, or they were all enslaved. You know, like, you fight for us or we'll kill your family. All this nonsense, right? Like, let's say our nation is attacked by another nation, and all those soldiers we know are being forced. They're conscripted. They're being forced to fight. They're slaves, right? Do we then not defend ourselves? Do we just say, "Oh, I can't. Sorry, I know you know what I mean?" It's like I'm just gonna lay down my arms and surrender. Well, of course not. You know, and so I look at the situation that's happening right now, and I have absolute compassion for those that are coming across the border. I get it. I think I understand why they're doing it, but I still have to be against it, basically, and say, no, we need to do this in an orderly way, the way it's always been done. How about that? That would work better because I've seen it work, you know. And right now, the reasons it's being done are obvious to me. Just being very simple-minded, it's just a control thing. It's a power thing. I mean,
yep.
You know, I need an ID and a background check to buy ammo if I live in California, but not to vote. Okay, that's bullshit, right?
That's
we know, yeah, we know what's going on. So basically, flood the sanctuary cities, have them vote, and that gives you control. It's just it, and I'm not saying I dislike anybody. Like you're saying, I'm not racist. I don't dislike anybody. It's not that. But the people.
You don't have to quantify on my page. Honestly, it's so. To me, it really pissed me off. I kind of did it, I guess, about my time in high school with a certain girl, right, who will always remain nameless, but always held in my heart. Here's the thing. We don't have to do it. There's no apologies. These people came here. They broke our laws, period, point blank. I have no compassion. You can say you have compassion for them. I don't. They bought the ticket, took the ride. And guess what? Your ride needs to go right back to fuck where you came from. And I will be very frank on this. Because fuck them. They're not us. I don't care anything about them. I care about Americans. We have enough black, Hispanics. We have enough whites. We have enough Asians. We have enough people in our country that are veterans that we don't take care of. But we have to take care of them. Fuck them. I'm a veteran. Veterans first. Everybody else, back to your country. And I mean that.
I hear you. I think people will be shocked one day when they find out who is funding it. And I'm not saying I know who's funding it, but I look at, to move people costs money. Like when I see these caravans coming. Yeah, I guess we know in some way, related to him, I'm sure, of course. But it's like, I think what might get people to think, and maybe it wouldn't, I really don't know. I don't know. It's kind of like Tim Pool often says, the left will think this and the right will think that. What's the point of even, having my channel? You know what I mean? He's kind of like, but when I see that people have migrated across countries that would have given them asylum, that would have been more like where they were coming from, which I think they might have even liked better, Maybe somebody from
Africans coming here now.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of like somebody from Guatemala who can go through Mexico and get can locate there, can get citizenship there, can get asylum there, right? I think they might like it there more than America. Okay, maybe they keep going, they come to America, but it seems like exactly like people coming from Africa and all over the world. People are coming a really long way, passing through countries where they could have gotten asylum, but they're coming all the way here. And the way I look at it is just me, just my little assumption. I have a feeling, especially when I see big caravans of people on flatbed trucks and trains, etc. Who the crap is funding that? Because when I see the people, like especially the ones I guess who are coming from like South America areas, and they're coming across the Mexican border, and you see the big convoys of people, I'm like, well, to keep these, maybe this is a little just my military history, since I'm acquainted with what it takes to move 600 or 1,000, people, it takes a lot to move an army, and the people who are coming across in those numbers of even over 1,000,
logistics is a bitch. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, they would be dying if they were on their own. Don't tell me that they got $5 in their pocket and that's how they got here. That's bullshit. That's asinine. Where's the water coming from? Where's the food coming from? Where's the medical attention coming from? Who knows which way to go? So it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how much it costs to, get those caravans across, but I have a feeling that the people in the caravans are not funding it. And I just think that, I don't know, maybe that wouldn't change the political angle on it whatsoever. I don't know, maybe nobody would see it any differently, but I think that it would be enlightening to truly have, powerful investigative reporting get to really, without a shadow of a doubt, through empirical evidence, who actually is paying for it. So I think that would be very interesting, because someone's got to be paying for that.
Well, I can tell you this from my time with CBP. I can tell you this. You had about 30% that were Mexican. The rest were OTMs. And that means other than Mexicans, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And we're talking about Muslims from the Near East. We're talking about Muslims from Africa. Of course, Christians they've slaughtered in transit. Don't doubt me on this. You're not getting people you want. And now they're selling children or renting children. It's still the same thing. To come across the border. If you think I don't know what I'm talking about, I actually do. And I know many people who are working against this bullshit. And guess what? They get the same pushback. Except it's the same thing with the media right now. You'll see locally, 1,200 people arrested, 700 people arrested, 300 people arrested in this city. Oh, wow. It doesn't get picked up by the media. The mainstream media. The lamestream media. This is a fact. I mean, man, look, I'm nobody. I'm just a cunt on my own show. but I'm telling the facts. And when you have 30% of illegals that come into our country every year, and yet the interesting part nobody wants to talk about, do you know how many people federally are in prison?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's about 70% that are Mexican. And yet they'll always say it's black that are in prison. Maybe state, maybe local, but no. Federally, it's about 70%. That's fact.
I guess it is very true that we don't know what's coming across our border. I mean, we don't really know. I mean, or I should say, we have assumptions, and to some extent we do know, of course, some more than others. But it's just a matter of when you have that open border, and when the idea of getting rid of ICE and such gets floated out there, just have an open border, anybody can walk across it. To me, it's like anybody with a little bit of common sense knows that that's crazy. So I think we're at kind of a crazy point in our politics in our country where there's this trick, this psychological trick of saying something so crazy and so outlandish and repeating it over and over again and being completely serious, only doubling down, never changing your stance. When you say something crazy and you just keep driving it like that, the next thing you know, it becomes a norm. So to me, having open borders and let anybody wander across from any country with any, literally, hey, it's kind of like saying none of us should have front doors on our house because you're a bigot, you're a Nazi if you have a front door. It should just be open.
Oh, yeah.
And anybody who wants to walk in, and you know what?
Or walls.
Also, yeah, or walls, exactly. And you know what? And you shouldn't be armed either. And you shouldn't have a desire to protect yourself. You shouldn't have an instinct to preserve your life or your family's. So no doors. And if anybody wants to come in and kill you or take your stuff, you should basically just be guilty and die. Because your existence is wrong. So it's really weird. So we have this and the thing is, I really think if you were to have said that even 5 years ago, people would look at you and go, what? But really, we are looking at, and I really, people, if you feel like it's displacement, and it's just, I think we have heard insane things pushed as morally superior to what I mean, like what's common sense, what is good has been made wrong, and what is wrong has been made right. It's just like newspeak. It's like the Department of Love, the Department of Peace. This whole 1984 Orwellian thing. We really are living in that, where it's like now borders are bad, front doors are bad. Defending yourself is bad. You know what I mean? It's
walls are bad.
Walls are bad. Yeah. So really, we're living in a time where no wonder we have all these prepper magazines, and no wonder, even if the government seems to, I always look at it like you've got the left, the Democrats who definitely do not like guns, they're gun prohibitionists, then you have a lot of the right who just aren't quite as bad. So, I mean, basically, regardless of our government's opinion on preppers, and having, collecting your own rainwater, having a pond and things like that, self-reliance not being in vogue and things like that. It's funny. We have 1984 happening on one level, with get rid of ICE and don't have borders, but the same, because that is correct and everything, and common sense is wrong. But then we also have a prepper community, and you could say along with that, it's also a Second Amendment community, an amateur radio community.
Yes.
That is ignoring the 1984 dystopian reality which is happening in this country, and they're just getting ready for shit. They're going, well, you know what? I'm growing my hydroponics in my home. I'm growing my salad greens and this and that. I went and moved where it's more rural, and I got some goats, and I make goat cheese, and I and I bought this. A couple of us bought this area right here, and we built little houses on it. and we live in a way that corresponds with our beliefs. And we got, we have alpacas because they're cool, and we got goats and a cow, and we got chickens, and we share eggs. And, I mean, it's funny. We literally are living in dystopia. 1984 Orwellian stuff is really happening. He thought it'd be 1984, but he was a couple years too early. But yet at the same time, look at Recoil Magazine. Like we have an incredibly powerful prepper community, which is just, they're not violent. They just want to get back to the lives that and mindset that their great grandparents were living.
Look, 1984 was not written as a guidebook. It was written as a forewarning. And unfortunately, we have many who take this as a guidebook. Now, my beautiful bride has just stepped in, and so we'll have to pause this. We need to continue this conversation. Not where we're at now. I respect where we went with it, but prepping and different things is where we need to go with it. So I have to, my dogs are barking. I know you guys can hear it in the background. The point being is, awesome. You folks need to listen to Radiant Creators, and they are on ACR, Alternative Current Radio. And this is Craig, and I really appreciate the time you've given me on this. I think we have sussed a lot of things out, but it's going to have to be a different discussion. I think you agree with that, right?
I think so. Yeah. Well, I know that we covered a lot of ground. We covered all the things that we were going to talk about and a couple more. Yep. And it's good. We get real. Sometimes maybe even too real for people. And everybody get your, start wildcrafting, get your tattoos, grow a beard, and and go be like your grandparents. Be
a ham operator as fuck.
Yeah, you definitely should have an AR in your shooting hand, and then your amateur radio in your weak hand. so that way they're both strong hands.
Move, shoot, communicate. That's how it is in TDS. Time isn't shooting.
That certainly is. Well, today's been great talking. It's been great. I gotta run. I gotta get to work today. But this has been important work too. Everything's important.
It always is. I'm super appreciative you've come here. So please tell everybody where you want them to look at and stuff like that, and you have the last word.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Well, this is Craig from Radiant Creators. Radiant Creators is a show where we interview inspiring people to inspire others. And you can find us at radiantcreators.com. Also, if you like alternatecurrentradio.com, you can go there. We have a channel there. You'll find us there, along with a lot of other amazing programming. And if you do tune into Radiant Creators, we keep it lighter there. We have fun, You might think, wow, is this the same Craig I heard on this show? Well, I'm multifaceted. There's the Radiant Creators Craig, who's working on, joyously interviewing, inspiring people to inspire others. And we definitely keep it there, real there too. But then, of course, also there's my inner Ted Nugent that likes to come out and just roar, and I do it on amazing shows like this. And it's really been amazing to be on number 200. And I hope people enjoy this. And, keep it real. Get your amateur radio license and grow a beard and get out there.
Be operator as fuck. All right,
Be
brother.
operator as fuck.
I love you. Hey, I'll talk to you offline. I'm going to close out.
All right.
Thank you guys for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. With that being said, I am drawing up the bridge. Everybody who's here on the big orange couch, finish your adult libation, your coffee, tea, or soda, because I've got to push you out, because my beautiful princess of Kaiser's Castle is here. With that being said, No music on the outro. Chef out.